Modern Family Guy is a show I've yet to talk about. Family Guy was one of my favorite shows growing up, though the show is certainly past its prime and hasn't been good for a very long time. Around season 12 was whenever I started disliking the show, and I know some argue that the show went bad before then, but keep in mind I was in high school during season 12. If I would have made this channel back then I would have made a lot of rant reviews on the show. But I'm much more mature now and kind of just stopped caring about the show and stopped even watching it altogether. I had BoJack Horseman to quickly fill the hole the show had left for me. Though that hole is open once again, but that isn't what this video is about. Now, I could go in depth with what made me turn on the show, but I want to keep this video relevant to what I'm actually reviewing. You really only need to know two of the biggest reasons. Number one being the cutaway gags and just jokes in general overstaying their welcome. These jokes would go on and just kill an episode's runtime. I think the best example of this is the karaoke cutaway from the season 13 episode Quagmire's Mom, which goes on for about a minute and half of that is literally just a still frame. Number two is the characters being awful. All of the main cast but Stewie and Chris turned into terrible versions of their past selves, or even unrecognizable. Peter being an abusive idiot to everyone, but is allowed to be because he is the main character. Meg just becoming the character for everyone to abuse, and Brian becoming my least favorite character of all time. Lois is probably the third best family member, though. She still should not be allowed to be around her kids, as she is also abusive, just not quite Peter level, and also stays with him because of the old fashioned till death do you part mentality that would be extremely unhealthy in real life. Anyway, today we'll be taking a look at the season 19 episode, Customer of the Week. Every once in a while, YouTube recommends Family Guy clips to watch, and every so often I do, just out of morbid curiosity. Usually I end up rolling my eyes at just how bad the jokes or characters are. But whenever I saw that Lois knocked a guy out and tied him up in the shed, I didn't roll my eyes, but was just kind of confused, but also interested. Something I haven't been for a Family Guy episode in a very long time. So, like any other Gen Zer, I decided to Google what the premise was. And it turns out this episode turns Lois into an actual pretty terrible person. But unlike most modern Family Guy episodes, this isn't due to bad writing. Lois being terrible was done on purpose and was actually the point of the episode. Now, an argument could be made here that you shouldn't try to make your protagonist into a terrible person. And yeah, in normal circumstances, I would agree. But with a show like Family Guy, it is no normal circumstance. The show has been on the air for 21 years, and if we're going off whenever I stopped liking the show, that's still 7 years, which is a fairly long time in entertainment. Plus, these characters are beyond redeeming at this point. I mean, the worst that could happen really is that Lois is just going to become worse, which would happen regardless. So I actually have to commend the showrunners on taking a risk and an interesting take into seasonal rot that I've yet to see. That being said, with a premise like this, it doesn't exactly give the option of it being just okay. This one is going to be either bad or good. And you know I must have found something here for me to want to review it. But before I go into my opinion on it, I want to go into the plot. The episode starts with Lois waking up and an alright first joke about Alexa. Lois says Alexa and her are best friends, and Alexa not really agreeing by just calling Lois awesome. Alexa doesn't appear in the rest of the episode, and this is something that can probably be either missed or ignored, though I feel it is kind of important. As it shows, at best, no one cares about Lois anymore, which I guess could be a metaphor for former fans, or maybe even current fans of the show. The rest of the Griffins show how rude they are to Lois, though in their defense, Lois isn't really the nicest person to them either. These are supposed to be jokes, but they aren't really funny in this scene. Lois then goes to her favorite coffee shop, which is supposed to be her release from her stress, though the only way this is portrayed is that her hair is now somehow fixed. She comes as pretty entitled in this scene, even holding up the line to talk about things no one cares about, like her credit card. I guess Lois is supposed to come off as boring and not even noteworthy, which makes sense. She finds a bulletin board that shows all of the photos of customers of the week, which begs the question how she didn't know about this until now, but whatever, minor plot hole. Poor music and lighting happens once she notices she isn't on the list. We then cut to the Griffins eating dinner, with Lois explaining her not getting customer of the week, and Lois saying that she deserves it because she is a good person, which is a phrase she uses multiple times in the episode. Peter supports Lois, but then takes it back because no one cares about Lois. We then cut back to the coffee shop, presumably a new week, with them announcing the new customer of the week, with Lois once again not winning. Then Lois drives Stewie around in what is a pretty funny scene, with Lois venting to Stewie and him deflecting everything she says. This leads to the worst cutaway of the episode just because it's gory and not really funny. Which, if you notice, I actually haven't been mentioning the cutaway gags, and it's not just because it would ruin the pacing of the review, but it's also because they surprisingly barely take up the episode, and in fact are only a few seconds long, like in the older seasons. Anyway, back to the coffee shop as they announce Customer of the Week yet again. This time, Lois brings Peter because she is sure that she was going to win and wants him to record her winning. I'm not entirely sure of why she thinks she is going to win. Like, I know she buys an expensive painting from one of the baristas, but this was just minutes before they announced what was planned all day. This leads to another scene at the Griffin's dining table, with Chris giving Lois the idea to save the life of one of the employees. This scene also has one of the funniest jokes of the episode. Lois attempts to poison a barista with a peanut allergy outside the coffee shop, though ends up killing her instead. This is, of course, recorded by the security camera, and here is where we get into the more interesting parts of the episode, with Lois knocking out, tying up, and threatening one of the employees in her shed so he doesn't tell the police. The employee tells her that she needs to take care of his cat, which she does, still trying to prove she is a good person, and it turns out he had two roommates, which Lois also ends up tying up. We cut to Lois doing her dishes and listening to the news, where it's announced that the two roommates were freed and reported her to the police. Side note though, her original hostage, the one in the shed, was never mentioned again. So I can only guess he died, or maybe the writers just kind of forgot about him. A bunch of police cars show up at her house, with Joe being the one to arrest her. We then skip 6 months, with Lois being released from prison, so maybe the shed guy actually did die. The episode ends with Lois driving to a different coffee shop to presumably start the process all over again. So, what did I think of this episode? To be honest, surprisingly, I really enjoyed it. It's not perfect as there are a few plot holes. Some of the pacing of the episode is a bit off, and the jokes are hit or miss. That being said, though, like half of the jokes are actually funny and are to the point and aren't just references. I really enjoy the premise and definitely feel they chose the right character to do this with. This episode is also kind of fun. I honestly wish more episodes of Modern Family Guy would embrace the worst parts of the show but not go too far like this episode did. Anyway, thank you for watching.